So I played this game, and it was a giant piece of shit.
It was just literally a giant piece of shit with you just plug the USB controller into. Did have Bluetooth though.
Yeah, which was strange because it was brown.
So it's a brown tooth?
Oh, gross. Like suddenly that just became like a whole brain gross thing. Hello, my HD remakes. You're looking great, better than ever before. Friends, thank you for joining us today on the Nintendo Everything Podcast, episode 74. My name is Oni Dino, and with me I have a man rumored to be a remaster, but we all know he's just a port. It's Galen.
Yeah. However, to be fair, it is a very delicious port.
Oh, no. That's not it. It's wrong. You've screwed up our perfect episode so far.
It was just, absolute gold beforehand, What's the podcast equivalent of a Tony? Or an Emmy? Or an Oscar?
Potty?
Straight to the potty with us.
Oh my god, I tried to think of just that, and then it sounded like the word for toilet that children use, and then I tickled myself so much that I laughed. I'm in my 30s. Friends, thank you for joining us on this episode. This is actually a special episode because we have special guests with us. One, Mr. Joe Zieja will be joining us later on. I had the pleasure of interviewing him earlier, so I'm going to slide that right into the middle of this episode. Check it out. And Galen was locked up in his cage, so he couldn't attend.
Yeah, he had me heavily drugged in a cage so that I wouldn't yelp or make too much noises. Hey, you know
fair.
Fair. I know I know exactly how it sounds, but I have to do that with my dog sometimes.
Maybe don't say that.
What? It's prescription. It's for his anxiety.
Yeah, and that's why I drug myself and chain myself up too.
Yeah, for your anxiety.
Oh yeah. So in addition to my interview with Mr. Joe Zieja, we are also... Oh, by the way, Joe Zieja is the voice of Claude from Final Fantasy Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Fire Emblem Fantasy.
I'm so professional. We're also going to be talking a little bit more about Animal Crossing. We also have all those Super Mario rumors that have happened this week. And Galen and I have a little bit of brainstorming, a little bit of fun.
Yeah. Always excited to brainstorm some potential rumors that are coming around.
And also a recent announcement that IGN is doing a summer digital event or something like that. And it seems like they're kind of scooping in and taking the opportunity that E3 has just kind of left on the table.
Yeah. It was a void that somebody was going to fill, I feel. But yeah, we'll definitely talk about that more in a bit.
I wish someone would fill my void. Of sadness. Of sadness! That one, not the other one.
Is that why you fill it with chains and drugs?
No, it's the anxiety. We established this earlier. God, I feel like my neck is snapping as I do the different voices. So friends, we are a weekly show. Episodes go live every Sunday. We are on the podcast platforms of pretty much everywhere. iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. Just go ahead and listen to us wherever you like to listen.
You can tell Alexa. You could just say, hey, Alexa, play the Nintendo Everything Podcast episode, and it'll do it.
Really?
Yeah. No, seriously. I was re-listening to one of our episodes while cleaning the kitchen, and it totally worked.
That's amazingly narcissistic.
Yeah.
So if you invite those kinds of... So if you invite those kinds of devices into your home to spy on you, then feel free to do that. You can just tell her what to do.
And the government will know that you enjoy the Nintendo Everything Podcast.
And you can also let not the government, but everybody else know that you enjoy the Nintendo Everything Podcast by leaving us a rating on Apple Podcasts. do the 5-star thing, leave a little note or something like that. It helps us to get recommended through algorithms. I know it seems like it's like a superficial thing and we're like, no, please, I need to know how great I am, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. But getting us exposed through the algorithms is the greatest way to support this show. We don't ask for money. This is a free show and we do it every week just for you. So we appreciate you giving back ever so slightly by leaving us a review and sharing.
We only ask that you help us expose ourselves.
Galen's the one that really needs help.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a ding than a dong. So let's get on with the episode. Now, Galen, you have no life.
I have several lives, but none of them seem to talk to each other.
And because no one talks to you, you talk to animals who talk back to you.
Mm-hmm. It is my only solace. They don't hurt me. They don't, say mean things to me. At most, they'll, say that, they want to teach me some emotions, which I am deeply gratitude for. Gratitude? No. Words.
I said nothing. I wanted you to crash and burn. I was watching it.
This PSA brought to you by...
So tell me more about your PISA with Animal Crossing's Harrison.
So I have been playing and continuing to play the Animal Crossing. I am officially about 2 weeks into the game now. I feel like I'm coming on the tail end of new exposure within the game. There is one more thing that personally I can unlock, and that is the ability to terraform and craft my island itself. Beyond that, everything else has been unlocked for me up until this point. With that being said, I feel I can give my overall impressions of the game because I've put way too many hours into this thing.
Right.
This has been a fantastic experience. This being my first Animal Crossing, it has been tons of fun. I feel like most of that has come from the community that I have surrounded myself with, the group of players who are playing the game with me.
Have you reached out to any of our listeners to visit islands and stuff like that and back and forth?
I have not actively, no, but I would...
What a jerk.
Well, and it's a little bit difficult because you have to actually create...
excuses.
You have to create an online ID and then be able to put that out there. But it's something I could possibly do. Maybe throw out a couple of dodo codes to people who want to come and pillage my arboretum, which is a weird phrase, but it's the only phrase I can make work.
Boy, if that's what you call it.
I've created my own little arboretum. It is full of trees of different fruit types. I have every single fruit I can get my hands on.
Well, that's just offensive.
So I am well stocked in my island. With that said, however, there were definitely some growing pains while getting through that. And I haven't really talked about those leading up until this point, but I feel like I put enough time to give an honest critique of it.
So Galen, since you're the least honest on this podcast, break down that barrier. What do you think?
Yeah. So this game has a tendency of being redundant and slow. And I'm not
That's
just
something coming from you.
I know. And I'm not even just talking about the time gating issue, which I've been quoted talking both positively and negatively beforehand. So this game has a tendency to create little repetitious stopgaps for the user experience. For example, there is anytime you want to go to another person's island, you have to talk to the dodo who is behind the counter. His name is, I believe it's Orville. And there's this whole spiel that you have to go through in order to actually to the point where you can either allow people to come onto your island or go to somebody else's island. And there's personality every single time. Like, these are a fully fleshed out character, which is weird to say for an Animal Crossing game, but they're fully fleshed out. But the words that they use don't change up. So it's always the exact same thing. And that personality becomes lost in the sense of you're just mashing the A and the B button of just wanting to kind of get through it just so you can do what it is that you want to do.
Okay.
When you are actually going to somebody's island, or if somebody is coming to your island, it freezes the game for everybody. And I always thought that was very strange. So,
what do you mean freezes the game?
So normally you would expect, hey, I'm going to go ahead and do my thing, and then this character will just populate onto the island. No. So what it will do is that there is a notification that pops up on the top of the screen that says there is a person who is coming into the island. Please stand by. And you can't move, you can't run around, you can't continue doing what it is that you were doing beforehand until that person has the entire level loaded into their game and then comes to your island. And it's a good, 45-second process.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which it gets really frustrating when you're in my position and there's about 4 or 5 of us who are all jumping between each person's island because they want to view the different shops and everything that's on there. It becomes like a 5-minute ordeal just to get everybody onto one island to do stuff. Yeah, and then another 5 minutes when they want to leave, too. So, it's crazy.
And that's not just like your internet connection or their internet connection or something?
No,
because I haven't heard anybody talking about this.
No, this is something that is built into the game itself. It purposefully pauses it. And even if it was an internet connection issue, the game shouldn't freeze everybody else from doing things. I mean, the game already locks it so that you can't put new things on the island or take away things from the island at risk of putting somebody in a corner and locking them up so they can literally not leave or do anything. It's very intrusive on your time. And it's that moment where, okay, somebody's coming to the island. I'm going to pull out my phone and check Twitter for a couple minutes here.
That's interesting.
But also, in the buying and the selling process, again, it's very redundant and very time-consuming. So, as you go through the game, you'll eventually unlock a second shop, the Able Sisters shop, and they're a clothing outlet. You go in, and they've got a couple of outfits that are on display, which, okay, cool, you can buy those outfits or pieces of them. Or, you can go through the wardrobe, the dressing room, over to the side, and you have a complete list of every single item that they have at that shop and it changes every day as well. They always have different inventory, so you always want to go in and check, and it's also different for every island as well. Hence,
that's cool.
Why you would want to go to everybody's island. But when you're going through, you can't just say, okay, I really like this style of shirt and it comes in 4 different colors. I want all colors. Doesn't work that way. You can only try on one set of clothing, and you can only purchase that set of clothing.
Well, that kind of makes sense, because then otherwise you could just kind of own everything very quickly, because you would just visit a whole bunch of different people's islands, and then you would buy the whole stock, and then that's it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I understand what they were trying to do with it, but in practice, when you're trying to do it, it becomes incredibly tedious. Just going on, and it gets to the point you forget, okay, did I buy this or did I not buy this? I can't remember. Because whenever you buy something, if you don't wear it out the door, they send it directly to your house. So it's not in your immediate inventory to be like, okay, I got this shirt in green, blue, and black. Did I get the pink and the white one? And there's a couple of, oh God, what's the word that I'm thinking of? Ease of use. Okay. That could have definitely been changed a little bit. Like, I understand the whole dressing room aspect and being able to be like, okay, you can only wear like one set of clothing at a time, but there's no other option to look at their inventory and to buy all of those things. Again, very time consuming.
So other than these little annoyances, you're having a good time though, right?
I'm still having a good time. They've definitely hooked me in with the actual routine of it all. I go on every morning, I check to see, what items are at the stores. I check to see what my turnip prices are, which, let me tell you, that game has completely changed for me 100% when I realized I wasn't doing it right.
Oh, well, of course you weren't doing it right, Galen. It's you.
Yeah, so every Sunday there is somebody who comes to your island from, I think it's 6 a.m. to noon, and they sell turnips. Well, you can eat them if you want to. You can't really plant them in any way. But what you really want to do is it's a mock stock market.
Right,
so
right.
you go to the other Tanukis, Timmy and Tommy, and they tell you what the prices of those turnips are for the day. And for example, I'll use my example this week. I bought them at like 96 bells a turnip, and I spent like 86,000 bells on these things, and they've just been sitting there waiting to be sold, which the other caveat of this is you only have a week to sell them, or the turnips go bad and you lose the entire stock.
Oh, so there's quite a game to it.
There is quite a game and quite a risk. It is very high risk, high reward. And every time I would go to check, I'd be like, hey, what are the turnip prices today? And Tommy will say, oh yeah, they're 56 bells. Okay, well I bought them at 96, so that's a bad time to sell them. You go in the next day, hey, what are the prices? Well, they're at 103. Well, technically it's a profit, but I know it can go a lot higher than that, so I'll go ahead and wait. And it just becomes this nervous sense of, do I do it now? Do I do it now? Do I do it now?
Well, that sounds titillating and anxiety-inducing.
A little bit, which is why I probably won't be getting turnips this Sunday. What's crazy about it is the rewards are huge. So again, the prices are randomized and different for every island that you go to. So for mine that day, they were, 56 bells a turnip. Okay, that's fine. My wife logs on and I ask her to check the prices at her shop, 404.
Wow.
When I bought them at 96. So I immediately flew straight over and then made this like 4 times my money back.
This sounds so ridiculous, but video games. What a time to be alive.
Yeah. But here's the catch to that. She checked a little bit earlier and it wasn't at that price. And now I'm thinking that the stock market prices change on an hourly basis, not a daily basis. Which, this is just a whole new game for me, and I've just been checking like once a day. I am not committed enough for Animal Crossing. Imagine
the money you've been losing. You have to think like a real gambler. Waste your life. Wear diapers.
But that routine has definitely set itself in for me, and I am enjoying it greatly. It is starting to peter off for me a little bit.
Well, every Peter does.
What?
No, go ahead. Tell me how you were playing with your Peter. Go ahead.
I'm not quite sure how much longer I'll be playing it this consistently, because I feel like I've gotten the most amount of enjoyment out of the game. But still, 2 weeks in, I don't regret any of the time that I spent on this game. So.
And plus, Xenoblade is going to be coming up in about a month and a half from now. So that's, of course, when you're going to be playing that game. Unless you're a coward.
And I've got Resident Evil 3 on my counter right now. So I'm
Is that game
really
out?
excited. Yeah, came out. Okay. Just came out this weekend. So, final impressions, Animal Crossing, fantastic time sink. It's a great way to lock yourself on a desert island and not communicate with anybody. And it's a great way to isolate yourself from society.
You know, it's not a desert island. It's a deserted island, except that it isn't even in that, though. There's people there.
Yeah. And towns and shops. And I'm starting to rethink this whole, isolation
it's neither.
thing.
Yeah.
And money sharks. There are money sharks there.
You know, I think a couple of weeks ago I did call you a loan shark.
Why?
I don't know. That was just whatever I said when I started the show, but I remember being like, your hands are flippers.
Would it be a loan shark, or would it be like manatee? I'd be a lone manatee. I think that makes more sense.
And I'd just be alone. So now it's time we'll check out my interview that I had earlier with Joe Zieja, the voice of Claude von Riegan from Fire Emblem Three Houses, a game Galen still has not played.
I still have not played it, but I do know who Claude is. He is the head of the Golden Deer member that I chose for my school.
That wasn't funny. It was just factual. It was just factual.
Hey, sometimes... No.
No,
It was
no
not
times,
funny.
Galen. No times. Back in your cage while I have my interview with Joe. Hello, my lovely students of Garrigmach. I am Oni Dino, and I'm joined today by my guest, Joe Zieja. You've heard his voice bring life to characters such as Claude von Riegan from Fire Emblem Three Houses, Fox McCloud from Star Fox Zero: The Battle Begins, and Caesar from Just Cause 4. But Zieja has voiced many characters across the mediums of video games, animation, television, and film. A versatile talent, Zieja is also an author, a musician, a streamer on Twitch, and not to mention a veteran of the United States Air Force. Joe Zieja, welcome to the Nintendo Everything podcast. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Dino. It's nice to be here.
Jumping off of my brief intro there, tell me a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
I think you kind of hit the major points, but yeah, I am I'm a military intelligence officer turned voice actor / author / I guess now I'm a Twitch streamer. That was kind of honestly, all of it's been fairly unexpected. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride. I guess my first voice stuff was technically I was a parade announcer at the United States Air Force Academy, where I went to school and got my commission as an officer. And then, yeah, it's been a pretty wild ride.
So I'd like to start off a bit by talking about your recent portrayal of the easygoing yet cunning strategist, house leader of the Golden Deer, Claude von Riegan of Fire Emblem Three Houses fame. I have to say, right off the bat, I was in love with him and the Golden Deer ever since I saw the house introduction trailer that Nintendo released last year before the game came out. The one where Claude, or you, says, "You, me, Golden Deer." And I was like, oh, swoon.
Yeah, that line was great. Me and the guy who wrote it, I think it was, his name is John. We were actually talking about it more recently, about that whole video. Maybe within the last couple of months, we were working on something else.
So originally, how did you get the part?
You know, I'd like to say it was like some kind of crazy, adventure, but it happened like most other castings, which is, a studio sends you some, says, hey, we want to bring you in for an audition, or they send you the audition and you record it from your home studio. I went in and they handed me a bunch of different sides for different characters. I know I read for Dimitri, I know I read for Dedue, and I read for Claude, and I think I read for at least one other character. And then some weeks later they said, hey, you booked Claude. And I was like, okay, great. And that's really, that was the grand adventure of me booking Claude von Riegan, which is, pretty similar to any other role.
Were you asked to audition?
I was. I understood that it was Fire Emblem, and I had played Fire Emblem Awakening before that. So I had some experience with the franchise. I knew what it was all about, but had no idea just how big the game was going to be and how prominent of a character Claude was going to be in it. I knew that Claude was one of the main guys, but I didn't really come to terms with just how big of an impact he would have on the story until maybe, the first recording session. And even then I didn't quite understand how big he was going to get until halfway through the recording sessions.
You mentioned that you did readings for Dimitri and Dedue. Do you happen to remember any of the voices that you gave them?
Dedue, I probably just took my own voice and put it down, and I was like, that there. For grounded stuff like these particular kind of video games, they generally don't want you to put on a voice, so the closest you can stay to your normal voice, the better. You'll find that most of the characters in there, even like Ben Diskin, who plays Caspar and Lawrence, they're both variations on his normal voice. It's nothing wild.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, Dimitri was probably very close to the voice I'm using now. Whereas Claude, I was like, well, I want him to be kind of laid back, so I put him up here and just kind of took his time a little bit, and that's where that kind of the Claude voice came from.
Interesting. So I was just about to ask, with Claude being such a smooth guy, how would you describe your approach to Claude's voice acting? You've sort of touched on it already, but did you add any little bits of personality that you didn't expect you would add to it?
Sure. There was lots of little moments that they ended up keeping in the game where I was just kind of riffing in the booth. Everyone likes the me making fun of Marianne. My ancestors are cursed, therefore I'm that line.
Yeah.
Everybody likes that. That was just kind of something I thought of in the booth. Like that was not a direction.
Oh, okay.
The same thing with I think it was Lysithia making fun of her and ghosts. And,
Yeah.
And like there's just a couple of things where like, you know, Claude doesn't take stuff very seriously. Even like life and death matters. He only gets mad like once in the entire game. So keeping that kind of I don't want to say indifference because he wasn't indifferent, but he was certainly relaxed and let it all kind of roll off of him. And that's where a lot of that inspiration came from. Just not taking everything seriously.
That's fascinating. Do you get like a, what do I want to say? Sort of like a character profile or something like that given to you before you start reading?
Before the auditions, usually.
Okay.
You know, usually you'll get like a character brief. Sometimes it's as simple as this person is male and is 25. But in this case, there was a one-page little thing about like who he was. And, you know, like this is what we need. Because we knew there was going to be a time skip, they needed to see the actors like, hey, this is how different his personality is going to be post-time skip. Okay, so demonstrate that. Claude's was not intended to be much different as opposed to Dimitri, who was extremely different. So yeah, like you got that beforehand. My first session, I had some representatives from Nintendo there who told me a little bit about Claude and the game and, you know, kind of get me up to speed. But the amount of prep, you'd be surprised at like how little prep goes into most of this stuff. It's usually a lot of times it's just like get in the booth and we'll figure it out as we go, which is a totally viable way of doing it. And it works sometimes. Works most of the time, to be honest.
So what makes Fire Emblem Three Houses really stand out to me is the bespoke character writing and interactions. Did you have a favorite support conversation that you recorded?
You know what's interesting is that answer has probably changed since I played the game. Streaming the game brought a lot of things into context that I didn't quite have. I had everybody's responses and I had everybody's dialogue in front of me, so I could see what they were saying, but not necessarily how they were saying it or just the feel of that other person. So as with most video game recording, I had to kind of invent it as I was going. So I remember when I was recording, I really enjoyed Claude and Lysithia's conversations. Those are still great, but seeing, like, after playing the game, listening to Claude and Lawrence go to verbal bat, those are pretty great too. So I don't know, they each had their own things. Like Claude and Shamir talking was great. They were all so good. And you brought up a really great point about the bespoke character writing. The team of writers that localize this game are outstanding.
Yeah.
It's, you know, we've all played a lot of games that have been localized, you know, maybe not the best, but they took their time, they infused life into it. It was just really amazing to see how different each one of those characters was. Like when Hilda was speaking, you knew it had to come from the mouth of Hilda. It could not have come from any other character. They did such a fantastic job.
Yeah, they really did. I was particularly shocked on my experience with the game where, you know, your students go into their first real battle and every single student says something on their own when, you know, they hit another enemy and, you know, they kill them or something. They're like, oh my God, like I just killed someone. And it's like, I was not expecting this bespoke writing.
Yeah, it's great.
For the characters in this series when like the last game was a little bit more of a relationship simulator.
Yeah, I feel that.
So how about a subplot or character relationship that you enjoyed that you wanted to know more about in Fire Emblem Three Houses, regardless if Claude was involved or not?
I want to know how Dimitri lost his eye. Like the fact that he just shows up 5 years later and missing an eye and nobody's like, hey, how did you lose your eye? Like, I feel like that was probably an important part in his life. Or like digging into that whole, like, what made him go so nuts. Now, again, I haven't played the Blue Lions route. I've only played the Golden Deer, so yeah, I really want to know about that. And honestly, like, there's a lot I want to know about all the routes. I really want to know Edelgard's point of view because so many people disagree with it. I would be fascinated to do. I think if I'm going to do another streamed playthrough, I'm probably gonna do a Crimson Flower playthrough to dig into the idea of an unsympathetic protagonist, because those story elements are so important in storytelling, and I would just like to dig into it and see what pops up.
Absolutely. I have the same fascination with it, and I love how Edelgard has basically two roots. So you get to see it from two different perspectives of her own story.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of fun hypothetical questions for you here. If you could have any character from an anime or video game be in the Golden Deer, who would it be?
Oh, that's interesting.
Sort of puts you on the spot.
It does, but I'm gonna take my time and think about it for a second.
Please do.
I think Edgar Figaro from Final Fantasy VI.
Oh, yeah.
I think he would be great in the Golden Deer.
I could see him and Claude getting on like a house on fire.
They totally would. It would be like this crazy Figaro von Riegan frat party. 100%. Yeah, I think that would be cool.
That's a great choice. And then if you could spend one full day hanging out with Claude, what would the two of you be up to?
Man, I don't know.
Perhaps he'd be showing you some archery.
My first instinct was like, yeah, let's go shoot some arrows, because I used to do that a lot. Now I don't do it anymore. That'd be fun. So yeah, maybe some archery. Honestly, like, I think it would be cool. Okay. I want Claude to take me to Almira for a day.
And then you get to see from his point of view.
I really do. That would be super cool. There's my fantasy pick. Take me to your homeland. Show me some cool stuff.
That's a great answer. So, have you had any experiences in your own life resembling that of Claude's?
Well, we actually joke about this on the stream. I attended the United States Air Force Academy, right? So I've been to a military school. And now, like, I think we ended up playing 3 games on stream that involved being at a military academy. We played Garreg Mach as a military academy. Thor's military academy from Trails of Cold Steel is in there. And I know there was another one, but now I can't remember what it was. But yeah, like, the idea of being in a military experience is certainly something I can relate to with Claude. And how he used humor to kind of deal with a lot of it. Graveyard humor, dark humor is a big part of keeping mentally healthy in the military. And while Claude doesn't really use a whole lot of graveyard humor, because I don't think it would be appropriate for... the thing about graveyard humor is it's just not necessarily appropriate for an outside audience. But he does use humor to deflect a lot of really serious issues. And what it usually has the effect of calming everyone else around him down. So I guess I can relate to that.
So on that note, tell me a bit about your early life. You grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey. What was that like?
It was a peaceful suburbia sheltered existence. It was a pretty much quintessential suburbia upbringing, with a lot of like really lucky circumstances. I was in a public school, which was extremely good, like one of the top public schools in the state, if not the country, with a really uniquely welcoming group of people. Like, it's funny, I talk about my high school experience with other folks, and I describe it to them, and their description to me of their high school experience sounds like Mean Girls, right? It's just like people being petty and miserable to each other, and my group of people that I grew up with was fairly cohesive. Like, on any given day, I could be hanging out with, like band people or cheerleaders or someone on the football team or someone from like the chess club. Like, it was really a neat integrated experience that I'm very thankful that I had. So, but otherwise, it was a pretty standard suburban experience where, when you hit a certain age, all of a sudden you're like, please God, get me the f*** out of here.
Yeah.
It's just like, you reach that moment, you're like, I need to see something else. And so that's kind of what spurred me to go on the wild romp of adventures that became, my military career.
I see. So that was at the age of 13 that you wanted to attend the Air Force Academy, is that right?
That's sort of like, that's the origin story. everyone in my family, no one can really figure out when or why I decided that that's what I was going to do. But the urban legend is when I was 13, I went up to my mom and I was like, I'm going to the Air Force Academy. And she's like, okay, do you know where it is? And I was like, nope. So like I had this thought or this dream, something came over me where it was like, that's what I knew I had to do. And then I pursued that for the next 3-4 years of high school and eventually got in, barely. And yeah, that was we still don't really know why, but something in me was like, that's where I'm going to be. And that's where I went.
You mentioned wanting to get out of the suburbs. Was there a reason behind that?
My town was a town of 15,000 people in New Jersey. It had a bowling alley and a movie theater that showed 2 movies. That was it. There really just wasn't a whole lot for a young man to do. And especially like in New Jersey, the driving age is older than most of the rest of the country. So like I didn't get my license until a year before, like I was 17. I think it might even be 18 now. Wow. But, you know, it was just like, it started to feel stifling. Like there was more out there. And I didn't disparage where I grew up at all. I wasn't like, oh, I hate this place. It was just like, this place has done what it will do for me. And now it's time for me to take what I learned here and apply it somewhere else. I mean, I'm sure there were moments where I was like, oh, I hate this place. But, you know, at the core of it, I always liked going back for vacation and seeing my family and all that kind of stuff. And eventually that town became a very peaceful place for me until I no longer had family there. That was pretty much, in an otherwise quite chaotic life, I could go back to that town of 15,000 people that only had a bowling alley and a movie theater and take a couple of deep breaths.
It was like your little respite when the rest of the world is crazy.
Yeah.
So getting back to the Air Force Academy, you joined in 2003. Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences?
You know, the Air Force Academy, they say, is a great place to be from. And that pretty much sums it up. The best view of the academy is in the rearview mirror. Those 4 years were extremely taxing, mentally, academically, physically, and it's a unique place that has a lot of merits and a lot of flaws. I used to call it Neverland because you feel like you just can't grow up. You know, it's tough to come to terms sometimes with being an independent, fairly competent person who has a bedtime until they're 22. You know, like taps plays and everybody goes to bed and you get in trouble if you don't. You know, not being allowed to leave campus more than like once a month when you're a freshman. It's a really unique experience that I can't really draw parallels to anything else. Like if you haven't gone through it, it's tough to explain. But I certainly wouldn't have done anything differently. And the skills that the academy gave me and the military gave me have helped me in so many other areas of my life. Yeah, it's just it's a really unique experience. It puts a very unique spin on everything else. This isn't necessarily about the academy. This is more about like my military years. But I was in the booth with I had just moved to LA. I moved here in 2015, so I actually haven't been here that long. And I had just moved to LA, and I was in the booth with a director. And as you know, in most areas of my life, I'm pretty easygoing. Like it's tough to rile me up. And I don't know. I did my thing, and I came out, and I had only been acting for like 1.5 years, 2 years at that point. And he looked at me, and he goes like, 2 years? You've been doing this for 2 years? Like, how are you not nervous? Like, how are you able to just go in there and do whatever? And I was like, well, Charlie, if I up in there, nobody dies. You know, it's just like I've been to the place where if you up, it can really hurt someone.
Right.
This is not that. Storytelling is extremely important, and like is one of the most important things that we as humans do. But the stakes just aren't high enough. You know, like if I can stand in front of a 4-star general and give him bad news, I can stand in front of a director and screw up. It's not gonna bother me, you know? So like, yeah, all that's about building a different perspective. That's what I think the military, one of the biggest contributions the military has made to my life is that of perspective.
That's really fascinating to hear. It seems like it is informing your life experiences, and it's like steeled your nerves even in nervous situations.
Yeah, for sure.
So going back, you mentioned you were in the military, but for how long were you in the military?
So I was at the Air Force Academy from 03 to 07, and then I was a commissioned officer from 2007 until 2012. I got out in 2012 to go pursue work in the government, doing similar things, and I remained in the reserves until 2013, and then eventually left the reserves as well as voiceover started to take its course in my life, and I didn't have the time and didn't want to take the risk of having, because when you're in the reserves, there's always a chance that like all of a sudden you're in Iraq for a year. That just wasn't going to fly with the path that I saw myself on. So I separated myself in a final way with the military in 2013 or 2014.
Back when you were in the academy, I believe you were the official cadet MC. You mentioned it before. Was that your first foray into a role that used your voice?
Yeah, and I didn't really understand it as voiceover or anything like that. It was just like, honestly, it was just a way for me to get out of parades, because instead of being in the parade, I was announcing them, and that was super cool. Yeah, that was a totally haphazard. I don't even remember how the opportunity came down. They were looking for another narrator because they do, you know, there's so much ceremony and pomp and circumstance between the parades and the football games and all that other stuff, that they had a small cadre of cadets. I think there were 3 of us or 4 of us that would announce stuff whenever it was around, ceremonies and all the like. And I auditioned and they picked me right away. And so that was, I did that for 3 years.
Wow. And did that sort of light a spark in you, or had you already been thinking about maybe voice work in the future?
Not at all. I would say that like, it wasn't until I was in my VO career full time for like a year and a half where I was like, hey, I've been doing voiceover since I was since 2004. That's really interesting. I did not even remotely make the connection that could have even been considered voice work until much later.
So then going back to once you finally left the military and got into the voice acting industry, could you tell me about that journey, that span of time?
You know, sometimes when I try to think about it, I've had conversations with my wife about it. It's hard to remember what that roller coaster felt like because it was so fast. The origin story, and I've told this a couple of times, I was on reserve duty in 2013 talking to a friend of mine online, and I said, you know what, would it be kind of fun voice acting? And I'm thinking cartoons and that kind of thing. And he was like, well, my company used to hire voice work from this website. Why don't you give it a shot? And I had some equipment at my house because I was a hobbyist musician. I've been doing remixes and stuff for Overclock Remix.
Oh, okay.
And so I understood how to make a recording and make it sound good for the most part. And ended up booking the first job I auditioned for. And after that, it snowballed so hard and so fast that after 8 months, I sat down with my employer and I said, I'm now out earning you. I either need to quit or I need to go part-time because right now I'm working 16 hours a day every single day of my life and I'm gonna die. What would you like? And they were like, well, we'll make a part-time position. They were really, really gracious about it. They made a part-time position for me, like understanding that I would probably eventually transition completely out. So basically over the course of the next 8 months, they took my hours down from, a 40-hour work week all the way down to like a 10-hour work week, and then eventually quitting, doing some different stuff, bolstering the unit I was in and applying some different skills that I had. So during that period, the first year was, like I alluded to earlier, was 16-hour days of extreme burnout. We had just had our first kid. It was absolutely miserable, but I could smell the freedom of not having to work for a boss anymore. And so I went after it ravenously.
That must have been so empowering for you.
It was really great. I always thought that fiction writing was going to be the thing that I was like, okay, I can write some books, establish a library, and then leave the military. Because by this time, I really quite firmly understood that this life was not for me, for many different reasons. And I wanted to do what I could to get out of it, but I was resigned to the idea that sure, I could be a career corporate/government man and retire. But if the opportunity presented itself, boy, I would love to not have a boss. And so once I found that I'd gotten my hooks in something, I really went after it hard. Hence the 16-hour workdays.
But that's amazing, though, that you sort of graduated from that, and here you are, completely, your own boss.
Yeah, it's been a really wild journey. There's really no day where I don't wake up and I go, really? Did that happen?
Yeah. So what was it like to leave the Air Force life and then readjust to civilian life? Did you have any like reverse culture shock from seeing people walking around undisciplined, wearing hats indoors, that kind of thing?
Well, the transition was a little bit easier than that. So I transitioned to working for 3-letter agencies in the government, doing similar work to what I had done in the military, right? So it's not like I went to work for Walmart or something like that. I went to work for people that knew their stuff. They were very much in my world already, and I was in theirs. There were some culture shocks, wearing a suit instead of a uniform, calling my boss by their first name instead of colonel or sir, that kind of thing. And also like the pecking order not being as firmly established. That took some navigating for me, understanding like, I think personalities played a bigger role when I was working for the government than they did in the Air Force. I think the Air Force kind of issues you a personality. And so you understand what to expect. So navigating the human element of each individual person that took some getting used to. Coming out, to take it one step further, leaving the government entirely and going into a world of actors, boy, that was different. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the idea that like there's this thing called you're on LA time and you're supposed to be 10 minutes late to stuff. Like it drives me insane. I can't do it. I can't be late for stuff. It makes me nervous. I can't not speak my mind. I can't put on like sometimes I have trouble filtering. I remember and the graveyard humor comes out every once in a while. It makes everybody uncomfortable. So there's still a lot of vestiges of my old life that come through. And I have to take a step back and I can't remember what I did. I think I told my agents, like 3 months ago, not even like it was right when I left, but like I gave my agents a time and I said 1600. Like I did something like that. So that sneaks out every once in a while.
That's pretty fascinating because for me, having lived in Japan, we always write in military time. It's not considered military time there. It's just time that you write. And so whenever you say 16 or whenever you write 1600, you always read it as 4 p.m. though. You never even say 1600. So it's even more confusing, I think.
Yeah.
And how about your experiences in the Air Force? Did it inspire you to start writing your book series?
If you're referring to the Epic Failure Trilogy, then yeah.
Yes.
I would say that the Epic Failure Trilogy is very loosely based on a lot of my experiences. There are lots of jokes that I make or characters that are in those books that are based on real people or an amalgamation of real people. There's no like parallels, with the exception of a couple. I'm lying. There's definitely a couple of exact parallels where I plucked a person from the Air Force and dropped them in this book in a very hyperbolic parody form. So yeah, one of the things that is so interesting about the military is how absurd it can be for how serious its subject matter is. Just like some of the things that, like rules that will come down. We make a joke all the time, like, oh yeah, one guy shits his pants, everybody wears diapers. So it's just like, there'll be like one mistake in a unit that's all the way over there, and all of a sudden you have to change the way you do business. Or like, leadership, like looking at certain leadership and being like, how did you graduate high school? Never mind, are now in charge of 400 people. Just like real silliness. There's a real silliness to it. The silliness also from the book basically comes from the idea of the pre and post 9/11 military environment. The pre 9/11 environment, for the 10, 20 years prior to 9/11, the military was a highly trained organization of people who didn't have too much to do. So, there wasn't really a whole lot of global conflict going on. Like, sure, we were still the world's police force and getting our noses in a bunch of other places that didn't belong. but 9/11 hadn't happened yet. That was a very pivotal moment. So like the military was filled with a lot of like joking around, and it felt a little frat-like, and it was just like the stories I would hear about those sorts of organizations pre 9/11, you know, it was a little more whimsical. It wasn't quite so serious. And then after 9/11, everything took a hard turn, and everything was like hyper professional, and there was no joking, and like it was like it's super serious. So the idea was to put a character in that situation who experienced both, who had been in the military during the pre 9/11, so to speak, phase, and then came back into the military during the post 9/11 period, and all the ridiculous things that would come from a person who thrived in a goofy environment in a very non-goofy setting. And it all ends up being rather goofy.
That's so interesting. And your books, the Epic Failure Trilogy, you have 3 books in that series. Do you have a desire to continue the series?
I have some spin-off novels from the series in my brain, but to be quite honest with you, I took a hiatus from writing starting essentially last year, and really haven't written anything in a long time for a number of reasons, not including but not limited to just my own mental health, taking too much on my plate, the difficulties of navigating the publishing industry, which can be quite stressful, and the amount of writing a book takes a long time and a lot of work. And when I've got something so strong like a voiceover career, it's hard to justify dedicating the amount of time it takes to writing a book and the amount of stress it takes to publish a book and keep it going. So when it kind of came down to just a personal moment I've had within the last 2 years where it was like, there's too much on my plate, I cannot do everything, writing was kind of first on the chopping block.
Huh, that's amazing. I mean, from an outsider's perspective, it really does seem like you do everything and you are capable of everything. So it's interesting to hear that.
And to be very honest with you, I paid for it. So like, you know, just from a mental perspective, I definitely have paid for it, and it has taught me that no, I'm not superhuman. I need to acknowledge that and smell the roses a bit.
But on a positive note, your audiobook versions are also narrated by you as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
I assume people can find them on Audible and all those.
Yep, they're everywhere. Audible is where I think most people have gotten them.
So moving back to the voice acting industry, how does it feel to voice characters in settings that may or may not accurately parallel some of your experiences in Air Force or military? You know, like with the Officers Academy, of course, in Fire Emblem, or being a pilot in Star Fox?
You know, it's kind of liberating. It's liberating not being bound by reality of stuff, and sometimes it takes me a moment to get over that. But you know, like you can understand the tone of a game, whether or not the accuracy is important to the story. I know that I was in Ace Combat 7.
Right.
And I remember having several conversations with the director that like, hey, the thing you put in here, that's not accurate. And I think, you know, if it was, oh man, what am I thinking of? You can be inaccurate in a game like NFL Blitz, right? That game is not about football. It's got football in it, but it's not about football. Okay? You can't be inaccurate in a game like Ace Combat 7 because your fans are comprised of people who are very enthusiastic about your subject matter, right? So if you use the wrong terminology for a weapon or you pronounce something wrong, that's a case where I'd be like, hey, here's the truth. I did it once or twice during Just Cause where like we were on a mocap set and someone was sitting in a cockpit and I'm like, hey, your throttle's on your left. It looks funny if you sit that way. They're like, oh, okay. And then they'll reshoot it or whatever. So, you know, most of the time though, it's liberating to just goof around in a fantasy setting and focus more on the story than the details.
That's interesting. And then are people generally pretty receptive to your feedback on things like that?
You know, it's funny. It kind of changes. I've learned that I have to give the credentials first. Because, you know, like people don't know, especially if it's a director I'm working with the first time. If I say like, hey, that's not how you pronounce that, they'll kind of look at me like, did you just give me an opinion, actor? And I'll be like, hey, I'm an ex-Air Force captain. And I'll be like, oh, okay. Well, what about this? And they'll move on to something else. Once you offer your credentials, and once you're not like, well, if you're not like a well actually person, if you're not actor splaining, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
If you're not just being a jerk, they'll be like, oh, okay. So it's good. And that context helps in all areas of your life. If you're like, hey, you know, I have a BA in humanities, and this is what I think about that. That can help you. You need. I learned from someone that you need permission to change people's minds most of the time.
Oh, that's a great piece of advice. So, being a voice actor, you have to play a wide range of accents and temperaments and so on. How do you train yourself and expand your range?
There's a couple different ways to do it. You know, most of my range came accidentally, just from listening to different things. Like, I tell you what, having a wife who likes the show Outlander, you pick up Scottish pretty fast. So, like, that was honestly, like, I owe 100% of my Scottish bookings to Outlander. And otherwise, it was just kind of like goofing off. If I had something that I really wanted to specifically learn, there's ways to do it. There's resources out there where, you know, like you try to repeat something over and over again, or you try to pick up on different vowel sounds. Because most accents, you know, they come in two parts. There's the vowel changes, and then there's the music. Like British English is a very different music than American English. They don't talk in the same notes. An American won't ask you a question like, do you want to go to the park? That's not how we talk, right? But that is 100% how all Brits will ask a question. Do you want to go to the park? There's that da, and it happens all the time. So learning the music and then learning the vowel sounds, it's just something you got to practice.
That's fascinating stuff. Like, you're talking to a linguistic person, and my accent is completely muddled from living abroad. So I will actually say things like that, like, oh, how do you take care of your voice? Like, that's a completely non-American, flow to speaking.
Yeah.
But I love thinking about those things all the time. And it's funny because, like, depending on whom I'm speaking to, I will have like a different inflection. So like when I'm usually on this podcast with my regular cohort, who is my childhood friend, I go right back to my Chicago roots and I get nasally and loud. But then when I'm, you know, speaking to a brand new person like you, I'm being a little bit more, I don't know, neutral, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, getting back to it, how do you take care of your voice?
I know my limits. That's basically the number one way I take care of my voice. If an agent passes me an audition that's a yelling orc, I turn it down. That's not me. You want a yelling orc, you hire JB Blanc, or you hire like Steve Bloom or something like that. That is not my wheelhouse, and I know it's not my wheelhouse. And there have been times where, like, you know, I've been cast, and I go in and, like, you know, if I get casted without an audition, which happens every once in a while, I'll go in, they'll be like, okay, it's this guy. And I'm like, guys, no, I can't. If you want to ruin me, we can do that for 3 hours, but we got to pick some other direction for this. You know, most people are very receptive to that kind of feedback. You know, there's all sorts of things that actors do if they're in a, you know, it's like I've had stressful sessions where I'm using throat coat tea with honey in it, or this loquat syrup called, I think it's Ninjam Pei Pao Kwa or something like that. And it's a loquat syrup that you can put, and that helps. But really, like, the only things that really help take care of people's voices are rest, knowing how to use it properly, and knowing your limits. Tell the director when you're hurt. You know, you gotta.
So I wanted to ask about something. Voice acting is becoming more and more prominent these days. I've noticed big budget animations and video games even will have big Hollywood actors getting involved. And I've always been sort of skeptical that this trend in the industry takes jobs away from the properly trained voice talent to trade for a recognizable name like Robert De Niro or something like that. What are your thoughts on this trend?
So that's a fairly sore topic for me. Having been replaced by celebrities several times in the middle of recording a project.
Oh.
Now, here's the thing. If including Hollywood celebrities makes the storytelling better, I can't knock it. Whatever makes a story more relatable to more people and opens more people's points of view on who they are and who the people around them are, great. if that's the way if putting Keanu Reeves in Cyberpunk does that for Cyberpunk, awesome. I have no problem with that at all. You know, if Keanu wants to come take all my jobs and make them better because he can do it better than I can, great. That's what this is about. The issue I see is that when some people get a little star-studded and all of a sudden start wiping casts in favor of people who are like not trained in voiceover,
Right.
or like general, just like not like a video game who doesn't have a gigantic budget isn't going to go get Keanu Reeves. They're going to go get someone who had like a TV show 5 years ago and may not have acted since then. And so what happens is you get these TV performances in the microphone, which we can see it doesn't work. TV acting, it doesn't translate. You can't act with your face in voiceover. Like you can't deliver the idea that you are feeling pensive with your eyes into a microphone. You've got to do it with your voice. And if you're not trained to do that, or you can't be trained how to do that, then you shouldn't be doing it. And it's come across many times where companies have put people in positions that they are not trained for, and the reviews come out and they're like, oh yeah, all the additional voices were great because that's who they go to voice actors for that stuff. But like, what was up with the main cast? It felt so stilted. It felt so flat because that TV actor is acting with their TV brain, and it's the first time they've ever done a voiceover job. And again, I'm not saying that like they can't do it. I'm saying that like you got to be really careful about putting your brand above your product. It's definitely a trend that's happening. Pretty much, I don't think there's been a voice actor in an animated movie in 10 years. It's all been TV celebrities. But you also, that's what I'm saying, like you can't look at those films and say, man, they were great. You know, like Wreck-It Ralph and like Frozen, it's all celebrities, but it sounds great because they were good. You just got to make sure that you're not putting the brand above your product. That's all. And if you can't afford a celebrity who can bring you your brand and your talent, don't pick the brand over the talent. And that's all. And that's just, you know, that's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, you know, impassioned opinion. I wanted to ask another specific question about, you know, voice acting trends. Just throughout the like video game industry, so this is particularly for video games, there's a lot of pressures associated with global simultaneous releases on the rise. Now, specifically for voice acting, I'll give an example here. Trials of Mana, which is a video game coming out by Square Enix, and we've seen so far in the demo that sometimes the voice acting in English doesn't match the character animations in some scenes. A character might physically emote very passionately or exaggerated, but the voice actor is delivering their lines in a more tender manner. There's a bit of a disconnect there, and from what I know about video game production, you know, being a cog in the translation stages of the machine, I can assume that perhaps the physical animations might not have been finalized before the voice actors were scheduled to record, but many others may not consider this. This is just like one example, but I can foresee this being a reoccurring issue with the rise in global simultaneous releases. Have you as a voice actor felt any pressures or growing pains associated with this trend for video games?
So I don't think it's that much of a new trend. The idea that the global simultaneous release is a label that you can put on a trend like that, but actors have been working with no context for dozens of years. You know, it's like, and it all depends on the production team. There have been plenty of times where I've gone into a session and I've been like, what's a Murfalder? And they're like, we have no idea. And I'm like, do you have a picture of a Murfalder? Because I'm supposed to do a Murfalder voice. They're like, nope, just give us something. And I'm like, okay. You know, it all kind of depends on how ready the production team is to do it. I can't think of, wasn't Fire Emblem global simultaneous release?
It was, yeah.
That worked out fine.
That worked out really well.
Because the production team was on point. They are sharing information. It's like Okay, yeah, let's go back to the military. It's like joint operations, right? If you're going to involve two branches of the military, you need to have a seamless bridge of communication between them. Otherwise, you guys aren't speaking the same language. You're not going to think you're doing the same things. It all has to be derived from the same strategy so you can develop complementary tactics. It worked in Fire Emblem because I had all the information. All the actors had all the information. We knew exactly what was going on in every scene, every time. And global simultaneous release or not, there's been plenty of localizations where, like the game has been out for 3 years and I will have less information than I did for Fire Emblem, which was a global simultaneous release. So I don't think it's a problem of the simultaneity of it or the timing of it. I think it's more of a problem of production chain communication. You have to make sure that everybody has equal access to all the information. You cannot hoard the information. And in some cases, I think global simultaneous releases can make for better performances. I was not at all beholden to a Japanese performance, which is a vastly different style. Japanese acting is way different. Right. You can see it, even outside of anime. If you watch a Japanese television show, they emote differently than an American audience. So when you try to translate that directly, be like, okay, here's the Japanese reference, just do that. It doesn't really work a lot of the time, and it can come, it can make the performance feel forced. So I don't know. I enjoy not having a reference. So I'm all for global simultaneous releases in general, as long as you can get that chain of information flowing smoothly.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point to make about the production team and the quality of information there. As a translator, I kind of struggle with similar issues actually, where sometimes I get a spreadsheet and it's got a whole bunch of words and it's like, well, wait, where's this proper noun? Like, is this a kingdom? Is this a town? Those kinds of things. And we're working without context all the time. So moving on to your streaming activity on Twitch, you recently played through the entirety of Golden Deer Route on 3 Houses, and you cosplayed as Claude as well for photo shoots and live streams. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you've embraced this character and the Fire Emblem community?
So the Twitch stream was very much a response to people telling me that I should stream. I didn't even really think, like, I had streamed, a couple of games very casually with no real schedule or purpose or really even production value. It was just me playing games that I was in, and I thought some fans would find it interesting. So I had streamed Just Cause, and then I streamed Ace Combat. Ace Combat got a lot more of a response than I thought. I think I was having 80 people tune in back when that game came out just to hear, I guess, an Air Force guy / actor's perspective on it. But really, everything that I have done for Fire Emblem has been egged on by the fandom. It's been a very much an interactive experience where I'm constantly out there interfacing with fans and taking their feedback and all that kind of stuff. The cosplay thing was a follower goal. If I had gotten to, I think it was 50,000 followers, I'd pony up the money for cosplay, and I would do it, even though I had never done cosplay before. And the idea of cosplay, not the idea of cosplay, but the idea of me doing cosplay makes me uncomfortable. It's just not something that I do. I think cosplayers are awesome. It's amazing, the things that they do. It's just it's just not for me. So, I was willing to put myself out of my comfort zone because the fans drew value from it. So it was very much something that I kind of did for all those folks.
That's great.
Yeah, and the stream became its own monster, which, I was like, oh, I'll stream it for a little bit and then we'll see and then all of a sudden it's just I have tens of thousands of Twitch followers and
so many
600 people showing up to watch me stream. And what has come from it has been maybe my favorite thing from Fire Emblem, which is the community that we've built. We have our own private Discord server for subscribers.
Yeah, I'm part of it. It's a really nice Discord. Everybody should join it if they're
Isn't it
listening.
When all this, I don't really, fandom was not something I was super familiar with. I was very scared of it when all this, I didn't know how it was going to be. I didn't know how I was going to be treated. I didn't know how, all that kind of stuff. I didn't know how fans would treat each other. And the Discord and that community that's come out of it has been so ridiculously kind and loving, and like people meet great friends and help each other with homework and like share cooking recipes. It's been so, and it mostly is autonomous. Like I interact, but like it's not like this like a weird like they're all here to celebrate Joe Zieja. It's really like not that at all. It is just people getting together for whom I am a catalyst to their getting to know each other. That's all.
Right.
And it's been really, really cool seeing those people help each other, and sometimes through some tough, serious situations. And I'm really proud to have been any small part of that.
And sort of on that same note, you also donate to charity as well. Notably, you donate a portion of your proceeds on streams to Able Gamers. And I follow you on Twitter. Recently, you've done some charity work benefiting service workers and grocery store workers too, is that right?
Yes, that's actually ongoing. I haven't finished it yet, but there are a couple charities that I work with constantly. One of them is Able Gamers, who makes video game equipment like controllers and stuff for disabled folks who don't have the use of, maybe one hand or, like not all their motor skills or stuff like that. Able Gamers makes it possible for them to experience the amazing stories that are video games, and that just lights me right up. So we've raised, I don't know, $2,000 or so for them over the course of time.
Amazing.
The other charity that I just started working with, because mental health is also becoming a passion of mine as I learn more about it, and my own mental health or the health of my friends and family, and my fellow veterans. And so I came to find out about Stack Up. And Stack Up is a organization that advocates for the mental health of veterans using games as a catalyst for healing and community building. And I recently kind of got in touch with them. And so like they've been getting, it's a little disappointing with the pandemic this year. I've been giving like basically half of whatever I make at a convention away to charity. And so like I made a big donation after Anime Impulse, and then like there was 5 conventions that got canceled. So I'm hoping to be able to contribute more to Stack Up. And then the last thing that we did was just recently, I have a Cameo profile, which is basically like you can buy a shout out from me. And I've never kept any of that money. That's always gone to either Able Gamers, but right now I just get a little drive for a couple of days, trying to figure out a way to get money into the hands of the like service workers and grocery store workers in these times, because they're really the front line now. And now healthcare workers are also under a lot of stress, but it's very easy to donate to help healthcare workers. There's really nothing in place to help people working like the graveyard shift at a grocery store, exposing themselves and their friends to coronavirus. So I'm still kind of on the search for like where I can give this money. But I think we've raised, I said I would match it. So I think I got $500 worth or $600 worth of cameos. So I'll donate another $600 to wherever we figure out how to put this. There's a couple charities that work with like restaurants for like service worker relief. I was hoping to be able to like get down to the grocery store worker level, but I'm finding it very difficult to find a touch point. But I'm still working on it. In any case, there's $1,200 sitting here waiting to go to someone who's having a real tough time during coronavirus season. So yeah, I enjoy contributing wherever I can.
That's fantastic. Joe, you're such a multi-talented person, and I'm terrified to ask your age because I worry how close in age we are and how little I've accomplished in comparison. But is there anything that you want to try your hand at that you haven't gotten to do yet?
Oh, sure. Pretty much everything. Like if there's no end
you
to...
say that and I believe you, actually.
Well, there's nothing, I'm not really lying. I love acquiring new skills and stuff like that. I would actually really like to, I'm working on a bachelor's degree in music production right now. And I think when that's done, it all depends on how my GI Bill works, but I would also like to get a master's degree in this degree that I have in my head. I don't really know if it exists, but are you familiar with the works of Joseph Campbell at all?
Oh, that's a name that my husband has definitely mentioned.
Okay, great. Well, Joseph Campbell was a comparative mythologist who kind of like studied all the stories and cultures of the world and tried to like understand what their use was. But basically, it's like a master's degree in the importance of storytelling. I would love to take that and get a degree in it, like Jungian psychology mixed with comparative anthropology and stuff like that. That stuff is really interesting to me. I don't know. I'd also like to learn sleight of hand magic. That'd be cool. What else? I have a different one every day.
Perhaps you could even do some music composition for a video game in the future.
Yeah, I've actually written for video games in the past. I think I've written, I don't know, 3 or 4 soundtracks for real small games that probably no one's ever played or heard of.
Oh, well, can you shout them out?
I can't even remember some of the time. I know I actually I wrote the soundtracks for 2 Otome games.
Oh.
Like, I don't know, 8 years ago? One of them was called White Lies and Sweet Nothings. I don't even know if you can still play it, but the soundtrack, I think it's still on SoundCloud. I was talking about it with some fans the other day because I'm starring in an Otome game now.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
What's the name of that one?
Mr. Love, Queen's Choice. And so, like...
a completely normal name.
It's a great name. That I had composed for a couple of those games prior, and I did sound design for another one. But yeah, I've done composition work. I'd love to do more.
Excellent. So lastly, are there any other projects coming up on the horizon that you're excited about, or anything you can talk about besides the aforementioned Otome game?
There's not much that I can talk about except the new Transformers War for Cybertron series. That got announced finally. We were working on it for all of last year, and I got cast as Bumblebee. So, and people are like, Bumblebee has a voice? And I was like, yes, Bumblebee has had a voice for everything except the Michael Bay movies. Give me a break. Everyone's stuck on the Michael Bay movies. But Bumblebee has always had a voice, and I'm glad to bring my voice to his character. I don't know when the series is going to come out. Everything is kind of in flux now.
Right.
But that's probably the only project I can talk about right now that I'm like super excited about. I can't wait for everyone to see this new iteration of this awesome franchise. It's going to be great. The writing was really good, and I think it's a really cool origin story for the Transformers that's going to cast a not nearly as whimsical of a light on what war is, even for robots, which is great.
And nowadays, people will finally realize that Bumblebee has a voice, too.
Does have a voice.
Of your memorable voice.
There you go.
Joe Zieja, thank you so much for joining me today on the Nintendo Everything podcast. Where can people find you on the internet?
There's not many Joe Ziejas around, so you just type in my name, and you're going to find me. It's pretty much Joe Zieja on Twitter, on Instagram, Joe Zieja on YouTube, and Joe Zieja at Twitch, or joezieja.com. Kind of have a monopoly on the whole Joe Zieja thing.
Cornering the market.
Cornering the market on the Joe Zieja domains.
Well, it was absolutely fascinating talking with you. Absolute pleasure. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on your knowledge and your accomplishments, and there's so much more I want to talk to you about, so you are welcome back anytime.
Thanks, Dino. The pleasure was all mine.
And one final request, could I get the voice of Claude to say our signature sign-off on the podcast?
So, no. Nintendo actually specifically asked me not to use Claude's voice outside of the context of the game. I know that guidance maybe wasn't delivered to all the actors, but it was delivered to me, and I have to honor it.
Okay, sure.
But Joe Zieja can say it.
Oh, okay.
Who sounds suspiciously like Claude. But I have to deliver that disclaimer.
Okay, sure.
For everything Nintendo, stay tuned to Nintendo Everything.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
This week in the news, we have kind of a different avenue that we're taking. We're talking about some rumors. We usually don't talk about rumors too much on the show, just when something's like kind of substantial or particularly interesting, but we never really entertain it too much just because you can talk yourself into a circle about rumors and, I mean, you're not getting anywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no critique happening. There's no excitement. Like, it's just whatever. It's like, oh, is Pokemon Stars a real thing? Like, nope. I don't know. Whatever. Next.
And especially for this week, like, I feel like any sort of news announcement had to be taken with a grain of salt because people still feel like April Fool's Day is something that needs to have more attention to it.
Ugh, yeah. Actually, you know what? I heard a lot of people this year being like, listen, we're done with April Fools. We don't need to hear it anymore. And I was really glad to hear a lot of voices on that because I think everybody feels tired about it. Like, listen, real life is pretty exhausting right now. I don't think that we need no more jokes. I mean, not that we don't need jokes, but we just don't need these jokes on a day that is like, okay, do the joke.
Yeah.
Like, it's never funny.
Can I say something that's very first world problem-ish? It's not even a problem, just like something that I noted.
No.
I used to be subscribed to ThinkGeek, the website.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, they were a website that sold a bunch of like pop culture nerd things, but it was back before they completely sold out their identity to GameStop. Anyway, for the past couple of years, they've always done an April Fool's thing where they will come up with mock items. Like, here is this Game of Thrones inflatable pool or something like that. Just really weird stuff, but it would always be April Fool's joke. And if you clicked on it, it would go into a tally and a vote, and whatever got the most amount of votes, they would try to make into an actual product for people to buy.
That's interesting.
The company went bankrupt last year and dissolved, and this is the first year that April 1st kind of came around, and I didn't see that normal email I was expecting, and I just a little bit of like sad moment. I was just like, aw, that was like harmless fun. I liked that.
Galen, that's pathetic. Super pathetica.
Like I said, it's not important. It's just something that I noted.
I know, but you wanted to put that out there. Do you want me to edit it because it's so embarrassing?
I mean, you are the master of edits. You are the master of edits. You are the master of edits.
Thank you.
My Sony Dino.
I like
Bringing that back.
Yeah, I like Sony Dino. He has mixed feelings on Final Fantasy VII Remake, but he really likes Resident Evil 3.
So Super Mario rumors.
So back to Super Mario rumors that we didn't even start because Galen ruined this podcast. This week we had basically a rumor floodgate happened. It seemed like there was some information circulating. In the world of Cray, and I'm talking about Cray from Breath of Fire 4. Breath of Fire? Fuck. I'm very tired, guys. I'm sorry. So these rumors were circulating. People weren't talking about it. It was behind closed doors. Then somebody said something. Then everybody was like, yeah, I heard that too. Yeah, us too. Oh yeah, us too over here. Hey, I did it, but can I say I did? No. And that's basically what happened. So this year is going to be Super Mario's 35th anniversary. And apparently, this is all rumors, Nintendo was planning to do something at E3 to celebrate Mario's 35th anniversary and to coincide with the Super Nintendo World theme park opening up in USJ. That's the Universal Studios Japan. But considering, coronavirus and E3 being canceled and probably delays to just like God knows what part of every type of pipeline, Nintendo was like kind of reevaluating it, just like everybody's reevaluating like literally everything. Like, did you hear earlier this week, Sony canceled, or not canceled,
The Last of Us 2.
Delayed it.
Delayed indefinitely.
Yeah, and apparently it's done. So they're delaying it, which is kind of weird because like I understand like movie theater stuff getting delayed. We're just talking about Sony Dino again. I understand like movies getting delayed because that's people getting packed into a theater in unventilated space to be right next to each other. But like a video game is for people to be playing at home, right? So
True. True, but if they're relying on like physical copies in addition to digital copies and just want to make themselves available for that, I kind of understand.
Yeah. I'm certainly not complaining. I'm just kind of raising a few questions. But if it does affect, and it surely does. I haven't really thought about this much. Shipping and just having to ship stuff that isn't necessarily important, then I totally understand.
Yeah, I also wonder if their decision to do that has something to like. Because the entire thing of The Last of Us as a setting is it's a post-apocalyptic and the world has been, overrun by this virus and society has collapsed essentially. So I'm wondering if they're a little bit worried about being insensitive to what's going on out there.
Yeah, possibly.
This is not the Sony everything.
No, let's get back to the Super Mario rumors for the third frickin' time. All right, everybody shut up. Shut up, Galen. Shut up. What? Oh, at E3, they were supposed to do this thing. They were supposed to release most of the Super Mario back catalog. And we're not really sure exactly what this means. There's been talks of it being like a Super Mario All-Stars 2 kind of situation with the 3D games. So that's like a remastered Mario 64, Sunshine, Galaxy 1 and 2. And then there's also talks of a deluxe version of Super Mario 3D World, which includes new levels. And then there's also talks about a new Paper Mario game coming this year too.
That would be great. Yeah.
So let's break this down. That's the whole story. Let's break it down. So I think that the people that originally started talking about this were VGC, was it? Video? I don't remember. And it was the same person or people who leaked the Indie Direct and then the following week to have another Direct as well. And they were right about that. So anyway, that's why we're talking about it, is because, this is a bit of a substantiated rumor, especially from other sources. But then there have been also those rumors from like Eurogamer and whatnot about Pokemon Stars and that one Star Fox game. This was all before the Switch, and that was going on for years, it felt like. And that never happened, So, I mean, we gotta take it with a grain of salt. Not just because a lot of people are talking about it doesn't mean it's real. So, what do you think, Galen? What do you think about like remasters of 64 and Sunshine?
A remaster of 64 is probably a lot more possible or feasible than a remaster of Sunshine.
Really? Why? I feel the opposite.
Well, the thing is because the 64 has that more of it's more iconic. We've already had a I'm going to call Mario Sunshine as kind of an open world concept, or their first take on something of an open world. And we already had Odyssey, which kind of delved into that setting beforehand. So I feel like if you did a remaster of Sunshine at this time, that it would be way too similar to the feeling that we would get with Odyssey.
I see.
Yeah, taking a step back even further and looking at the 64 version, it is a very different style. I mean, you're still loading in your different levels, you're selecting which worlds you want to go to, and they still kind of have that open world idea to it, just on a much, much smaller scale. Being able to take that concept and that premise and put the same kind of graphics that we had on Odyssey, like, that would be phenomenal. And we already saw, like, Peach's Castle was there in Odyssey, so the models kind of exist for that. I feel like going for 64 is a better decision than with Sunshine.
I see what you're at. I'm just thinking from like a technical standpoint, like what's popular or what's possible, but you're thinking more market-wise and what consumers are hungry for.
Correct. Yeah.
Then in that sense, I do agree with you. I think that 64 is the more iconic one and the bigger one to do. However, on a technical level and man hours, money, that kind of thing, 64 needs to be kind of redone from the ground up. And Sunshine can just get like an HD remaster with updated textures and 1080p and all that junk. and it's fine. Like, you just keep the exact same models because the polygons are fine on it. Like, just look at what they did with Wind Waker. I think it would be a situation like that. That wasn't a ground up remake. That was a refresh, you know?
True, but with Wind Waker, it's a little bit of a different story because the art style kind of begged itself directly to that ease of being able to be manipulated.
Don't you think that Sunshine has the exact same appeal to it, though? I mean, like, in that generation, they were doing so many, like, sunshine beachy things, and that's exactly the same thing with Mario, Sunshine.
True, but from a technical aspect, you're looking at comparing the two games, Wind Waker with its cel shading versus the polygons and everything that were in Sunshine. Like, Sunshine is a much more complex game when it comes to the visual aesthetics to it. There's a lot more calculations. No, absolutely.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
You're looking at polygon shading versus vector graphics, and
vector. The art styles are definitely different, but I don't think that because Sunshine is a different art style than, say, Wind Waker, it doesn't mean that Sunshine can't just have like an HD remaster to it, which is like a smaller job, and then them port that over. I think that is a very realistic technical goal. For 64, they need to, really remake that from the ground up. And when you're doing that, you have to make sure that your physics are working the same way, because that's part of the big thing with 64. And like, remember the DS remake that they did of 64? Like, the physics on that were slightly different and people hated it. That's just going to require a lot of tweaking and a lot of extra work. And I can't imagine them remaking all of these games. You know what I'm saying?
No,
Same thing with like Galaxy. Galaxy needs to be a same situation as Sunshine, where it's just like an HD remaster. Make it a little bit prettier, but basically keep everything the same.
I would be thrilled, absolutely ecstatic to see either of these games come back as an HD remake. Like, there's been enough time between both of them, between the last time I played it and now, that it would be a fresher experience for me.
Yeah. I can't imagine all of these games coming out, though. You know what I mean? Like, Nintendo is usually, especially with their like bigger stuff, like Zelda and Mario, that they know are gonna like sell like hotcakes no matter what, they drip feed the shit out of that. So like, I can't imagine them doing, one game that has 64 Sunshine and the 2 Galaxy games in it. I can hardly imagine them doing a double pack of Galaxy, even if it is like a bare bones HD remaster. I can hardly imagine that, let alone 64 and Sunshine coming together. I think I might have just said some of the names wrong. Whatever, you get what I mean. If they're all together in one pack, then they're just going to be straight ports, no visual anything flair at all, and I just would be really surprised. I mean, prove me wrong, Nintendo. That'd be cool if suddenly they were generous on these games, but like, they could so easily re-release Sunshine HD remaster for $60 and people would eat it up. Same thing with 64 if they remade that. Same thing with the Galaxy games. Say they did a dual pack of that, $60. You know what I mean? That's just so much money.
Yeah, no.
But I'd be super happy even if they were like, yo, we're gonna re-release just one of these. Like, I'd be super happy about that. I didn't like Sunshine when it first came out, but I'm willing to, revisit it, especially if they do a little quality of life updates or something like that. I'm all about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in this year of Mario, that's not the only stuff that we heard. We are also hearing 3D World, Super Mario 3D World, which came out on the Wii U, that it's going to get a deluxe version, which will include a whole bunch of new levels and stuff, and that'll come out for the Nintendo Switch. I think that's a good idea. I would much rather see a full-on sequel of 3D World, but that was a great game for the Wii U, and it's good to see it to come over.
Yeah. I'm kind of right there with you. Like, I'd be happy to see it. I had a lot of fun when I played it the first time. I would maybe be more appreciative of some newer levels on there, but that would be great. And
a new character. I want a new character in there. Wario.
Now, I want a brand new character. Like, add someone new to the Mario canon.
Yes, I've been saying this forever. I want a third Mario bro, or I want like Bowser's brother or Bowser's wife, but then he's been cheating on his wife this whole time. I don't know. Bowser's brother, maybe. Just like make another character, you know, like I know they have to be super careful with the Mario brand just because it's the squeaky clean image, and that's why it's fun, but it's never like my favorite of the Nintendo properties. But, you know, throw a little fun in there.
Nintendo, if you're listening, I have an idea for you right now.
He'll tell it to you for free.
Yeah, I'll tell it to you for free because I want to see this happen. Come out with Bowser's either brother or half-brother. His character design will be a much thinner, kind of like gawkier version of Bowser, because you have that compare and contrast there. Okay. They start off working together, but then Bowser's brother gets greedy and ends up betraying Bowser. So the last either half of the game or last fourth of the game is you working with Bowser, and you may have to go back and you can play as Bowser in some of the levels to beat Bowser's brother.
I'm not a writer or anything like that, but that's genius.
Thank you! I think that would be very fun, very fresh, and a great way to add a new potential Smash Bros. Character.
Yeah!
God damn it!
Spit take over there?
Almost. I almost spit tea all over my laptop.
Oh no!
Oh no!
And in the year of Mario, they also talked about how a new Paper Mario game could be coming out this year. And this is going to be a Paper Mario game much more akin to the first two games, and including everybody's favorite on the internet, Thousand Year Door.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be like Sticker Star or Color Splash. Of course, all rumors. That really reads like a Nintendo fan's wet dream, so like, you know, whatever. But that'd be cool. Exactly. I liked the battle system a whole lot from Thousand Year Door.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the Thousand Year Door was my first entry into the Paper Mario series. I never played the original one.
I love the original.
I was actually a latecomer when it came to the N64. Like, I rented it a couple of times and played the system, but it wasn't until like the last year that it was really in production that I actually picked up my own copy. So,
yeah. I really think that the first game has such better pacing than Thousand Year Door. Thousand Year Door sags in a bunch of different chapters, and the writing is really wordy for me, or at least it was back then. I remember it being just too much dialogue. Like, they would say three text boxes in something that they could have said in one text box. And I would love to see like a new entry, so I'm hoping this is true, because the writing in Color Splash was phenomenal. It was the best in the entire series. Like, Color Splash, a flawed game. Visually, it was beautiful, and it had a lot of great set pieces, and had some really, really good writing. The battle system was not great because it just didn't encourage you to play the battle system. It was like, avoid enemies. That is actually more beneficial. But I would love to see a new entry that goes back to the old fighting style and partner system, new characters within the Mario universe. Like, that's always fun. I always like, you know, oh, there's this Bomb-Bomb, now she's your buddy. Oh, this Koopa Troopa, you know what I mean? Like, little things like that are just fun, you know, play with your universe.
I've never wanted to have a Goomba on my side to tell me about all of the other enemies.
Yeah, I want a Magic Koopa as a buddy.
Ah, that would be fun.
Yeah. What kind of new partner would you like to see?
I want a Blooper. I want a Blooper as a partner.
Yeah, all right. I'm down with that.
I want a Blooper. I want a Piranha Plant.
I definitely want a Shy Guy.
Oh yeah, definitely a Shy Guy.
I want a Shy Guy with some like really good character writing that like he's just really, you know, his family is disappointed in him or whatever about his life choices, and he's like, oh guys, I don't know what to do, guys, like, and he's like, you know, shy and like really super anxious, you know what I mean? I would love that. That would be me in a damn video game, I'll tell you what.
You know what I would love to see? I would love them to do a callback throwback and bring over someone like Malo or Gino in a Paper Mario form.
I don't know what the licensing issues are with those games or with those characters, but I mean, Nintendo and Square have been working together. So like, God, I would just love a proper Super Mario RPG. I want to see those characters again. I want to visit that world again, expand on it.
Okay. Another idea for you. Characters from Super Mario RPG with the characters from Paper Mario. Blend the two together. You've got the RPG aspects and the combat similar to what you would find in Legend of the Seven Stars, combined with the interactive exploration that you found in the Paper Mario series, such as being able to fold yourself up in different shapes and everything, and you can switch back and forth between these two. Because what do you do if you're a 3D person in a paper world? What do you do if you're a paper person in a 3D world? Like, there's a lot of potential.
They already made this game, Galen. It was on the 3DS and it was called Paper Jam.
That they did.
Do you forgot? Did you forgot?
I want them to do it better.
Yeah, we all do. Boy, I put that game down halfway through. I actually don't like the Mario and Luigi RPG series, which is weird because on paper I should really like it, but I just kind of don't. I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm. On Paper Mario? Hmm.
Paper Mario I like more than the Mario and Luigi series. I don't know. Maybe it's the level design or the game flow maybe is not so great.
I really liked the early Mario and Luigi games. Like, the first couple ones that they had for the Game Boy Advance, I think it was Bowser's Inside Story that I started to fall off with.
Yeah, that was the third one.
Yeah. Which is a shame, because they're all still fantastic games.
So, we'll see. I would be ecstatic to see a new Paper Mario with the old battle system. That's definitely what I would want. Especially with the writing these days.
Give it to me, Nintendo. I want it. Give it to me, Nindy. And copyright claimed.
No. We're both just sitting here in silence trying to think of more lyrics that we can incorporate into this song.
Oh, I thought we were moving on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, moving on. Yeah, duh. And some recent news. IGN has announced that they're going to host something called a Summer of Gaming event in light of E3 2020's cancellation.
Mm-hmm.
IGN said that they're going to do live broadcasts, on-demand programming with publisher presentations, pre- and post discussions, developer interviews, a whole bunch of stuff, and they even have confirmed participants including 2K, Square Enix, Sega, Bandai Namco, Devolver Digital, THQ Nordic, and more.
Yeah.
This is a pretty interesting one because I'm so surprised that the ESA themselves weren't like, E3 is not happening, but we will do a digital event. We are in talks with, people right now, just so they don't kind of just leave the door open for other people to take it. Like, when people were talking earlier this year about like, oh, is E3 dead? And I'm like, no, it's not, because it's just canceled this year, just like everything else is canceled. Now I'm like, ooh, shit. Like, E3 is getting attacked right now with this.
Mm-hmm.
Competition-wise, good on IGN for being like, you know what? We're swooping in. They're one of the real big guys, and it makes sense that they would, give a shot at this.
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me at all that somebody would do something like this. And to me, IGN kind of makes sense because a lot of people already sort of focus in on them as a visual media to collect on. I mean, I know there's other outlets that also kind of deal with video game news and whatnot. Hi,
Nintendo everything.
Exactly. But IGN just having not only the capital and the recognition to be able to tote with that, but also kind of an infrastructure already set up to best accommodate those changes.
Yeah, I feel like they could pull this off.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Like, a lot of these companies, Devolver Digital was already going digital. Like, regardless of what was going on with E3 and whatnot, they were going to have some sort of a presentation and whatnot. It's just now they're all collectively going under one banner now that the name of E3 has been put at risk.
It's going to be interesting to see how this really affects the rest of, E3 in the future. I mean, it's still going to be weird too because, publishers are, just as clueless as the rest of us about, what's going to happen with delivery pipelines and production, let alone, development. I don't know. It's just really weird.
Yeah.
It's such a strange time with coronavirus literally affecting the entire globe. It's odd.
Yeah. But on the other hand, we're still getting all that banding together in a way. So
yeah, I think that's good for the industry.
It's odd, but it's hopeful for me. That's the way that I choose to look at it.
Yeah, sure. So we'll be covering it very soon. I mean, that's going to be in June. So that's pretty soon. That's good though, because I like talking about these kinds of things.
I like talking about video games. Just period.
They're the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Video games have literally given me new life and ruined my old one.
1-ups will do that to you.
And if we were a visual podcast, this is when I would look into the camera and be like, womp womp.
Man, I would not want to be the editor for a visual version of our podcast.
Yeah, Mr. Vigital. I wouldn't want to be the editor of an audio podcast of the shit that you say.
Did you just say editor?
I am an editor.
No, you said editor, like with a cow. Editor.
You said that.
No, you just said it.
I did
We're
not.
We're getting off track here.
Swine.
We're getting off track.
We never get off track on the intentional Nintendo Everything podcast. I'm literally falling apart like Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn at the end of Death Becomes Her. Shout out to my mid-30s friends who also listen to this podcast that like that movie, all two of you.
Is that the movie where the two ladies die and then they find out that they're being brought back to life, but their bodies are decaying, so they keep hanging around the the funeral director who can actually give them the surgery?
You got it kind of right, because we watched this movie for my birthday. That's how much I love it. When we were all 11 years old. I think it was my 11th birthday party or something. I was like, guys, I have to show you this movie. It's 15 years old or whatever it was.
Oh, God. I remember nothing of that movie except for the basic premise.
And you even remembered that wrong. So it's Goldie Hawn. This is the Goldie Hawn Everything podcast. Goldie Hawn, Meryl Streep. They are women that hate each other. One of them is a actress, like a Broadway actress. And I can't believe I'm talking about this on the podcast. This is so stupid. It's great. I love this podcast. I hate it. And they basically are, vain and they're not good people. And one of them stole their husband and that kind of thing. And the husband is played by Die Hardman. What's his name? Bruce Willis. Woos Brillis. Yes. So Woos Brillis, in his best role that he's ever been in, honestly, is this sheepish, timid funeral director. He's a mortician. He paints the dead people up for their display. And so they take this potion of eternal life that Isabella Rossellini gives to them. And Isabella Rossellini is a freaking queen. I love her so much. And so they both take this potion of eternal youth separate from each other. And they're like, oh my God, you took the potion too. What are you doing? And so they're alive for the rest of time. They're alive, but their bodies are still decaying. So that's why they hang out with the funeral director guy, because he can, do their bodies back up, because their bodies are peeling and their skin is falling off and their bones are falling apart. And then eventually the women that, you know what? Just watch the movie. It's great. It's called Death Becomes Her, 1988 on the Nintendo Everything podcast. That's my additional DLC. Galen, what are you recommending on additional DLC?
Oh, okay. Oni, Do you like tigers?
You're gonna have to be more specific.
Like the animal tigers.
Oh, then no. I thought you were talking about, you know what? Never mind. You don't need to know about that world.
Do you like murder conspiracies?
I do. Is it by numbers?
Do you enjoy gay gun-toting rednecks?
No.
Then I've got an interesting combination for you. So my recommendation this week is a documentary series on Netflix called Tiger King: Murder, Mayhem, and Madness.
And this is an actual documentary. It's not a mockumentary, right?
No, this is a legit documentary, and this is serious in all of its faults. So the entire documentary is about this guy who has dubbed himself named Joe Exotic, and he is a zookeeper. He owns exotic animals, specifically tigers, and I think he has like 1 or 2 bears in there. But the entire thing of his zoo is that he tells people to come here and they can get a hands-on experience. They can pet tiger cubs, and it's the world of big cat keeping. On the other side, because there's competition of this, you have this Carol lady who is an absolute monster. We're talking like Game of Thrones levels of like manipulation with how she's trying to portray herself, and she is an evil, evil woman. And then on the other hand, you have this other guy who was Joe's mentor, who is a straight up freaking cult leader and is a harem of wives. And all 3 of them are trying to run this operation of, come see us, we've got these tigers and animals that you can go ahead and pet. But it is crazy. Their personalities are narcissism to an extreme in every sense of the word. Joe consistently makes death threats on Carol to the point where he's like, here's a blow up of Carol. This is what I would do if I ever saw her. And then pulls out his handgun and shoots the doll in the head on live stream. Like, this is all real stuff too.
Well, Galen, this just sounds incredibly normal.
I forget your social circles. Yeah, no, this was... I was a little bit confused the first time I started to watch it, and then I just got completely hooked in. So if you have Netflix, check it out. It's a ride.
And for me, my second additional DLC that I'm doing is the new video by Zeltic on Zelda rumors and mysteries that have since been debunked. Now, there's a little bit of shameless self-promotion in here for you, because I helped Zeltic with 2 of the 3 topics in this video with some Japanese translations, but Zeltic is just a lovely dude. He's super knowledgeable about all things Zelda. He's got like genuinely thoughtful content, and he works really hard researching thoroughly and editing his videos. Just great quality stuff. Do check him out and his new video.
Did he also ask you to be the voice of Japanese Link?
No. But who can be? Wait. Hold on. Let me try right now.
Zap! Zap!
That's my Japanese.
Not bad.
Arigato.
You took the joke further than I was expecting you to. I'm proud of you.
Hey, that's what I always do. That's what we do on the Improv Thing podcast.
Mm-hmm. You just don't know when to quit, and I just kind of stand there and just critique everything.
So, speaking of delusions of grandeur, let's slide right into my DMs. And what? If I'm broken.
Listener mail.
Listener mail. Now, Galen, I know you have no fingers.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. No. Actually, better than this. Galen, over there, look.
What?
It's Mega Man.
Aw. Hey, Rockman.
And he wants to, don't call him by his slave name. He wants to shut up. This is a serious podcast. He wants to write us an email. Explain to him how he can write us an email right now. Go, hurry.
Well, Mr. Man, you can go ahead and write those emails, which is done on a computer. I know it's a little bit weird for you since you don't have that technology. You can send those emails to nintendoeverythingpod@gmail.com. You got to use the computer and stop Dr. Wiley.
Nintendo Everything Pod at gmail.com. Right into us. We need some more emails, please.
Emails that may sound a little something like this. So, this week we are following up on the email that we alluded to on our last episode. So, Juan, thank you for writing in. Let's talk about the email you sent.
Thank you, Juan.
Juan writes in and says, since the departure of Sakaguchi, the Final Fantasy has been in a very noticeable decline. Its focus on graphics and audio and detriment of everything else seems to point out that Square did not learn their lesson from Final Fantasy The Spirits Within. Juan goes on to write quite a bit. I am going to paraphrase a little bit. There's a lot of info on here.
It's a very long email, and it is super well thought out. Thank you, Juan. We read all of it. I read it a couple of times.
Yeah, very well written, I want to say too. But he makes commentaries on Final Fantasy's approach from a technical prowess versus its overall perception. He alludes to the way that the games have been marketed, especially ever since Final Fantasy VII has come out. Some personal opinions on there, and also some differing opinions on how Enix and Square Enix has been treating things a little bit differently, especially when it comes to Final Fantasy versus some of its other games as well, like Tomb Raider. But at the end of the email, he says, my questions are, is it really the absence of Sakaguchi that has caused this change with Final Fantasy? To what do you attribute this shift? Why can't Sakaguchi's successful direction be replicated? To what do you attribute the insistence on this approach, which seems favored mostly for Square's IP of Square Enix, seeing how Dragon Quest has refused to go towards that path?
Well, thank you again.
All right, so first question on here is the absence of Sakaguchi what has caused this change in how Final Fantasy has been directed?
So for me, I don't think that it is the absence of him or his departure. I think that this has been a long time coming with the Final Fantasy brand in particular.
Yeah.
It just got popular and popular, especially with Final Fantasy VII. I mean, 7 was a huge success, I agree, due to the marketing push. I remember back then, like, I knew Final Fantasy because I was playing it on the Super Nintendo, but then the 7 was coming out, and people that didn't know what Final Fantasy was or what JRPGs were or turn-based anything was, they were talking about it. It was a big marketing push for that game, and that was a huge success for it. There were just, since that point on, delusions of grandeur and like kind of delicate genius at work kind of stuff happening, and it got, I think, worse and worse. That was not, kept in check. And I think that this is just my opinion, like whatever, maybe this didn't happen, maybe I'm the biggest idiot on the internet and you're downvoting right now, but this is something that happens in many different companies when they're like, oh, okay, this person made some really good stuff, just let them do whatever they want. You have to contain that creativity. You can't just give like full on creativity if you want to make a marketable product. You have to have a little bit of a box or a little bit of a chain and let them, work to their creative heart's content. But when you're like, okay, Final Fantasy 15 has been in development for 11 years now, like you need to dial that back. That's why like 15 should not have been in development that long. There needed to be somebody to be like, listen, we're bleeding money. Or like the Spirits Within, we're bleeding money.
Yeah, well, in the Spirits Within is actually a really interesting case there. I won't go into the specifics because other more eloquent people have done a much better job. Matt McMuscles actually came out with a new episode on this video literally just this week. So
Yeah, so perfect timing for us to bring it up for this email.
Absolutely.
I was just going to mention too that like during this time of Final Fantasy VII and moving on, like the PS1 and PS2 era, Square were really known as like the masters of CGI. They in the video game realm and even like spilling over, because you look back at those CGI scenes in 8 and 9 and 10, and it's just like gorgeous stuff happening. I remember when 8 finally came out, or like the promotion was coming out for it, and it was just spellbinding. And it was like, I've never seen anything this beautiful before.
Yeah. But also like the direction of it as well. Like everything looked absolutely beautiful, but they knew how to convey more than just that emotion. Like the music in those as well. Like there was everything was so well crafted and well blended together that, especially back then, it was the amazement of what we were seeing, but also the emotional impact of what was going on. My problem is I think like Square felt after a while they could capitalize that because they knew what they were good at, and it became redundant. Like it started to lose its luster because we had seen those exact same things before. It's kind of like being burnt out on Marvel movies. Like the first couple were really cool, and when Avengers came out, yeah, that's awesome. I've never seen anything like this. Wait, they're coming out with more? Wait, Ant-Man? Who cares about Ant-Man? Like, that kind of a thing.
We just saw Spider-Man. What the hell?
Andrew Garfield was all right. Why do we need another one?
Oh, because those movies weren't good.
You know what? The first one was actually not bad. The second one was terrible.
Final Fantasy. As Juan says, they just went down the visual and audio department above everything else, like vastly above everything else. And like Final Fantasy has always been a very visual game. Like in the Super Nintendo era, even, Amano Tsukigo, that's a singer. Amano, my God, what's his name? Amano Yoshitaka. His art has been the forefront of these games all the way to 6. And then Nomura's art was from 7 on. And so they've always had those kinds of roots for it being just a big, beautiful visual game. So it makes sense that they would go in that direction, but the fact that they didn't realize that like the storytelling was maybe not the great in some of them, or it just got a little bit too heady or muddled. And I feel like I mean, I hate to attribute it to one person because there's no way. It's a collaborative effort. There's no, one person to it. But I will say that I have experienced such a trend with the games that I personally don't like so much, or I feel are weaker, or just too heady and don't make any sense or whatever, with Nomura's direction. The Kingdom Hearts series is a damn mess, and that is all Nomura's baby. You know what I mean? And it's just like, they think that they have to tell like this completely outrageous story to make something great, and it's like they're not mutually exclusive. It can be a simple story and it can be great, or it can be a convoluted one, but they just like threw ideas. It's almost like writing a whole bunch of like phrases or keywords, and then you throw them into a hat and you're like, a story. It's like, actually these need to connect somehow. Yeah,
absolutely. The part that it says here about like why can't Sakaguchi's successful direction be replicated, well, and it's because I feel like a lot of that has to do with the focus on recognizing that you had something special and trying to say, okay, do this special thing again, we want results.
Yeah, and I don't know how much I can like agree with Juan's opinion on that, because I didn't play a bunch of 10. And I need to replay it. I really enjoyed 10 too, not for the story, but I did enjoy 13 to some degree. I'm definitely not as hard on that game as everybody else is, but I definitely do feel the same as Juan, where I like the earlier entries in the series so much more, like 9 and everything before, so much more than the newer stuff. So yeah. I can't say I super agree with them, or even just mostly I just can't say that I'm super knowledgeable about it being Sakaguchi who has the winning formula, and that's like the key thing. I think that it is a big part, but I don't think it's maybe the only part. I think that there's so much more at play here, and cronyism, is something I've mentioned with Square Enix. Maybe I have those suspicions, and I think that that's a big part of it. And I think that maybe Sakaguchi saw some of that writing on the wall, and that's why he wanted to leave and do his own thing. And I've played a few of Sakaguchi's own games afterwards, and they were good, but I don't think that they were masterpieces.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also know that, directing Spirits Within really kind of took a toll on him as well.
Yeah. Juan also mentions about Square Enix having loftier and loftier sales goals rather than realistic ones. Specifically, he mentions Tomb Raider Reboot in 2013, which they published, and that it was a sales disappointment for Square. And that reminds me so much of Capcom with Resident Evil 6. That was happening so much in the late aughts and even in the early 10s. Is that what we call it?
I think so.
But I totally agree with Juan's perspective on having big budgets and that being a big problem. And Dragon Quest series seems to be on smaller budgets, and I think that that's part of the success as well. Like, I don't know if we talked about this or if I was just thinking about it like in preparation to read this mail out on the podcast, but there's a movie production company called Blumhouse, and they make a whole bunch of cheap horror films. Some of them are, a lot of them are absolute garbage, and then some of them are great. So, but anyway, the point is that they have low budgets very intentionally, but they work within their budget and they keep things real realistic. That way, if something is a failure, it's actually not that big of a failure because it recoups all the losses. And I think that that's sort of the thing with video games, is that like it's a young industry and like they're trying to learn how to, not just throw money at everything. And when you've got, the capital to back it up, that's how things like the Spirits Within happens, where like your budget, and I mean, I just saw the Matt McMuscles video, go check it out, everybody, but it went from like 70 something million as the budget to 170 something as the budget. Mm-hmm. And that's just nuts. Like, you can't let it get that big because then you're just asking for it to fail. Same thing with like 15. It was in development for so long.
Yeah. To be fair with the budget on that, like, I'm not trying to make excuses for them by any way, but I just remember specifically that they focused a lot on trying to make the main character from Final Fantasy Spirits Within like an actual movie icon. Like,
yeah, so weird, wasn't that?
That was super weird, but I kind of see what they wanted to do. Like, it was 100% a publicity stunt, but I think they kind of believed it in themselves, and that's why they were willing to put so much money behind it. Like, they kept saying, hey, if we can prove that this is a concept and that we can actually make these character models that once we perfect it the first time, we can bring it over into other movies and make profit off of that, that is a pioneering vision that could lead to a new way that people look at the industry. It didn't work.
Yeah.
But I don't fault them for trying.
Oh yeah, for creativity, not at all. Full marks.
Yeah, but I think with them, it just came to the point of, we got to double down on this. This is going to work. We got to double down on this. It's going to be better.
With their budgets, like, especially with like last generation, even a bit of this generation, it was like a race to last place with just like bigger and bigger and more AAA budget and that kind of stuff with franchises. Yeah. And stuff just got like muddled and mismanaged.
Yeah. And that idea is also why we kind of led to the, the indie revolution boom, or whatever you want to call it, where just these indie games came out of nowhere and they were getting so much more praise and critical acclaim compared to Resident Evil 6 and, whatever numbered franchise title that Assassin's Creed is up to. So
I hope that Square Enix is just like maybe one step behind Capcom in terms of like reviving their series and like doing it a little bit better, because like before, Capcom was just marching Resident Evil into a grave.
Yeah. From that grave, Resident Evil has risen and is now terrorizing the sales charts.
Yeah, you shouldn't have said that. That sucked.
Biohazard.
But I hope that Square can, change what they're doing with mainline Final Fantasy. They keep making these like spin-off series to do things reminiscent of old Final Fantasy games, like with Bravely Default, Octopath Traveler, Heroes of Light. And I mean, like even Kingdom Hearts was originally and still is like a spin-off of sorts,
Yeah.
And it's just like, what are you doing to your main guy, Square Enix? You're doing him dirty. Bravely Games and Octopath are all well received, and it's like Final Fantasy is just in its own tower of its own spire, and there's just a bunch of cronyism going on with management, and it's untouchable, and it's just not good for business.
Well, and you know my feelings on this. Like, they built that tower up themselves. They put themselves into this position by, its hype and its marketing and saying how this is the most remembered and greatest RPG ever, and actual words that they have used in their marketing with things like Dirge of Cerberus and Advent Children.
Yeah. And another thing is that like a lot of that art direction and like I guess super brooding story style that Nomura loves so much, I'm just so tired of it. It's just like such a 13-year-old J-rock in 2002 kind of vibe. And it's like Nomura is constantly there, and it's like, listen, we all grew up. We're all done with that phase of our lives. Stop trying to make us do that. Why do we have belt buckles everywhere?
When they made that paradigmal shift to incorporate more of a, I don't want to call it steampunk, but like the mechanical world of Final Fantasy VII and beyond, because they've had a theme of like blending sorcery and machinery together since that game. When I'm talking to people, if they don't like Final Fantasy VII, most of the time it's because they say that Final Fantasy VI was their favorite Final Fantasy game. And I'm comparing the two genres between that. Like, even in Juan's email here, he's talking about, like, the technical achievements and the progress that something like Final Fantasy VI has been making at that time. Once they went to that more mechanical formula to it, I feel like that's when they started to get more into a monetization other than a statement piece on the art form itself.
Yeah.
So
possibly. And I think that like the reason for that is not so much Sakaguchi leaving, it's more of like too many cooks spoiled the broth there, because Final Fantasy became super successful, and as soon as everybody saw it, more cooks entered the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Nomura is seen as like this god, and it's like, I think he needs to be more of an assistant role or like a supervisor role. I think there needs to be new blood there. Like when we talked about Platinum before, where they're saying they need to bring up more directors of games, and that's why Taura made, Astral Chain.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I think every company should be doing. Finally, I think we're seeing Nintendo doing that a little bit with their younger crowd, with like Animal Crossing and especially Splatoon.
Yeah.
It's super important to have many different creative types that you nurture.
No, absolutely.
So great email, Juan. I love that you also mentioned Parasite Eve. My God, I would love another Parasite Eve game. As long as it's kept away from Toriyama, though. He's the one that wrote Third Birthday and created Lightning, and he thinks that she's like the best character ever. And he directed the 13 trilogy. Keep it away from Toriyama. Go back to original Parasite Eve, where Aya Brea was an awesome, badass cop. She was a more confident, cooler version of Cloud. And she went on a date with a guy she wasn't interested in, and then he's like acting like a piss baby when everybody lights on fire, and she's like, get out of the way, and she knocks him over. Just like, that's the greatest intro to a freaking character ever. It's like, yes, Aya Brea, I loved you.
I think I have a digital copy of that on like on my Vita or something like that. I really need to play that game.
Oh, dude, you gotta. The battle system's great too.
I've heard really good things about the battle system.
Balance-wise, near the end, it gets a little clunky, and it could use like a lot of reworks and rebalancing and stuff. But there's a lot of really cool stuff in that game. That game was ahead of its damn time.
I would love to see a remake of it. And this seems to be the age where we're seeing a lot of different remakes and re-envisionings.
Yeah,
So,
I'd much rather see like just a genuine another entry, just maybe a reimagining entirely rather than just a full-on remake. Like the original game is good,
the original game is good, but I don't know. It's some of those older games that we have such high praise for, I feel like they need a little bit of an update to reflect how progress has been made, both in a storytelling and a technical aspect.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing though, is that I don't think that there was anything technical that was holding Parasite Eve back at all. I think there's a little bit of balancing that could be done on the weapon system and the very end boss fights.
Okay.
And that like one magic spell that was like ultimate. But the battle system of Parasite Eve is better than what we have going on today. Nowadays, it's like a whole bunch of like third-person action games with a skill tree and just like action RPGs, and it's getting like really simple these days, and I'm just like, oh, a little tired of that. Parasite Eve was like turn-based and action mixed together in a creative way when they were just trying stuff out. And that's the other thing with like smaller budget games is you can just try shit out. Instead, they're making huge games that are like, this can't fail. We have to do the safest thing possible to make sure it's the most marketable thing and that, people are receptive to it. And then that just makes the game more likely than not suffer.
Yeah.
Rather than just cool things being tried out. I want to see more mid-tier games, like mid-price point, $40 games, $50 games being made, and more creativity being thrown at that because it's a smaller budget, and they're like, you know what, if it fails, it's not going to fail that much. We're going to recoup our losses, at least.
Yeah.
So Juan, thank you for this impassioned speech that I just gave. I hope that I answered your question.
And if you want us to answer your questions with impassioned speeches, feel free to send us those emails at nintendoeverythingpod@gmail.com.
That's nintendoeverythingpod@gmail.fart. So, come hang out with us on nintendoeverything.com. That is the website you want to be staying tuned to all the time because 24/7 we got newscasters reporting on the fastest Nintendo news ever. Check us out, nintendoeverything.com. Stay connected to us on Twitter. That's @nineverything. We also have a YouTube, youtube.com/nineverything. And then if you want to tell me how great I was in my interview with Joe Zieja, just kidding, tell me how terrible I am, that's over at Oni_Dino on Twitter. I also have an Instagram. I make food and sometimes I put it on there. Sometimes nothing happens the entire week. Tell me what's wrong with me at Oni__Dino for the Instagram. Galen, where are you wrong?
I'm usually wrong on the internet in general, but if you'd like to reach me on the internet, go ahead and send those messages through Twitter at Mobius087. And occasionally, if you want a bit of a glimpse as to what I'm doing cooped up at home, you can find those images on Instagram. That handle is true_Mobius. And hey, you know what? I actually didn't think about that before. If you guys do want to play Animal Crossing with me, shoot me a tweet and I'll send you a dodo code.
You shouldn't be doing that to our listeners. Don't dodo them.
Hey, they have to walk into it themselves.
So we'll see you next week for whatever this just was. Until then, for everything Nintendo.
Stay tuned to Nintendo Everything.
Bye.
Adios, everyone.